A massive thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. So something arrived in the mail today and I'm going to be opening it for you guys on camera, and it's some Himi Guoache, and I've never ever used Himi Guoache. Oh my gouache ever. I've never used it. So in this video today I'm going to be using them for the very first time. Now apparently they're a cross between watercolours and acrylics, so fingers crossed that they are, because they're the mediums I am most familiar with as an artist. So let's do it. Okay, so let's open this up. The guy didn't even knock on my door, he left it in my bin. It's charming that, isn't it? Anyway. So we're going pink. Look, I even did my nails to match. I always do that to make sure there's something else inside. I'm like a big kid at Christmas. It's like, what else is there? Get a bit of ASMR. Oof. Oh. Oh, there's a mark on it there. Is that picking up on camera? I'm a fussy fluffer. Oh, presuming I can mix my colours on that. I like that a lot. Wow. Okay. Hello, Himi. So nice. Wow, I actually really like them. Okay. I actually like the long candles on these. They're nice. I'm liking that slot while them brushes fit back in there. Oh yeah. Immediately I'm presented with a bunch of yogurt pots. Now what I did notice is that these small like cartons or pots, they slightly overlap one another, like the rims of them overlap, so I had to be extra careful when taking them out and peeling the lids off of them so that I didn't cross-contaminate any of the colours. However, after all of the lid peeling, the pots fit nicely into place. They reminded me of something that would be straight out of kindergarten, which makes them all the more visually appealing. Whilst peeling the lids and placing them into like their plastic little pockets, my mind was flooded instantly with inspiration. The colours were intriguingly captivating my mind's eye, which of course is always a good start. So I'm starting a new sketchbook here. I mentioned this one very briefly in a previous sketch file. I think it was in my last sketch file. Yeah, I tried in this video to show you everything what was going on. I tried my best to show better angles when filming. I've only posted like 51 videos now, but I'm still working at this. I'm still aiming on improving and working better with my cameras for a more visual, better experience for you all. The sketchbook I'm using here is the Moleskine watercolour large notebook. The paper is called Pressed and 200 GSM, which means it can take a very heavy body of water and it can take very heavy body mediums. So as I was swatching, I was instantly taken aback by how high the quality of these paints actually are. Like, they're so vibrant, very opaque, and they glided straight onto the paper. So I honestly felt like a big kid who had just like discovered candy for the first time or something. Something like that. I knew when I was swatching all of the colours that I could easily become addicted to working with this medium. So I used 2 water pitchers when washing my brush in between swatching just to avoid cross-contaminating the paints. I also kept some paper towels to the side just to wipe my brush off on as well. So I always swatch quite a decent amount of paint when trying out certain brands of paint, specifically when I've never used that paint before. So this helps me to get familiar with how the paint acts and responds on my surface of choice, in this case, my moleskin. Because I'm swatching a fair amount of paint, just over a 50p piece size, around that size per swatch, I can see the colours better with how they appear and their overall opacity. There is a nice variety of paints in this set. Colour mixing is always like super essential to me. It's a key part of my process. And with such a great variety of paints and colours to choose from, it was apparent from the very get-go that I was going to be able to mix an abundant amount of different colours and tonal values of saturation, enabling me to stretch my creativity progressively even further. So these paints are actually like super affordable. I got this set of 24 colours, including brushes and palette, for $27.99 on Amazon. So the paint is non-toxic and 30ml of paint is contained inside each one of these little pots. Switching brushes now, and I'm swatching the white. What I did notice is that although all the swatches had dried, including the black, I'm going over it here that you can see with the white, is that some of the black still picked up and mixed in with the white. But it's kind of understandable considering the fact that you can reactivate these paints. This is just something that I kept bearing in mind when painting with them later on. So you can see the paint here has gone a little bit grey and cross-contaminated with the white. So the black has cross-contaminated with the white and the white cross-contaminated with the black. Vice versa, you get what I mean. I absolutely love Miyazaki's Spirited Away. It's always going to have a place in my heart. So I decided on painting some iconic scenes from this movie, starting out with the scene where Chihiro and No Face are on the train to go and visit Yubaba's sister Zeniba. So I have recently been very poorly with a bad like chest infection, and when I get poorly with a chest infection or a cold, it tends to take its toll on my asthma. So for folks who don't know, I'm a severe asthmatic, and if I'm not like doped up on meds and my blue emergency inhaler, I end up like a spaceman without his visor in outer space. I'm a goner. It just seems to have a knock-on effect and travels over my lungs. Whereas anyone else in my family who has a cold or a chest infection, it will of course it won't be good, but they will still be able to, breathe. But me, I get wheezy, like I don't know if anybody knows the penguin. I think it's Toy Story 2. I get like that, dude. I'm up on the top shelf collecting dust. So I get very wheezy, very fatigued very quickly. So this is something that I really struggle with when I become ill. And I don't often get ill at all, but I just could not find the motivation for anything and had gone on complete fight and flight mode. So because I became ill shortly after my intro for this video, I didn't want to paint anything that was going to be like painstakingly too busy or chaotic. So this is why I chose to paint some scenes from Spirited Away. It was something that I gravitated towards, and it was one of my childhood favourites of mine, so I just wanted to stick to something that I was most very familiar with from the past. Speaking of health and all of that, this brings me to today's sponsor, Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning platform with thousands of classes for you to choose from. Maybe you are wanting to try out a new hobby and explore something that stands out to you and is a bit fun and different, and something that you just want to embrace that is exciting. From journaling, animation, photography, the list of classes are abundant with Skillshare. Speaking of health and well-being, with Sharon Stevens' Mindset for Artists, How to Nurture Your Creativity class on Skillshare, you can explore your creativity without being overcritical. In Sharon's class, you will explore the creative mindset, how to become more confident through your creative passions. Whilst we may love to create, very often enough we can experience mindset challenges that feel like a burden onto us. And this can make creativity more of a challenge than a pleasant experience. Time management is an obstacle sometimes, thinking that you don't have enough time, doubting your abilities and capabilities to be even able to start creating in the first place. These challenges can be tackled with the help of Sharon Stevens' class. She will explain to you exactly how you can nurture your creativity and allow that creativity that you've bottled up for such a long period of time to finally flourish. It all starts with great mind habits before we can truly succeed. Whether you are a beginner, artist, or even highly experienced, there is something for everyone in her class to relate to. Less procrastinating and more accomplishing. Sharon helps you take that action towards your goals without feeling uninspired. Instead, you'll end up feeling more uplifted and motivated to start creating. So the first 1,000 people who use the link in my description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare Premium. Now back to the video. So today's scenes that I'm painting actually fit nicely into what I want to work on this year. So a goal of mine this year is to work on conceptual backgrounds, illustrations, and some of my own personal concept pieces as well. So I personally love the Studio Ghibli movies and stories, particularly because the worlds, no matter how far-fetched and imaginary they seem to come across as, they have a tangible mix into our reality. So an audience of like almost any age can relate to them. So if you're not familiar with the Ghibli movies, they are mostly hand-drawn traditionally, and any sort of computer animation will get put aside, like it'll only be somewhat used. The more frames the movie has, the longer it will take to draw, because every frame is drawn by hand. Every frame in Spirited Away is a work of art. Like the movie is just delivered with stunning craftsmanship. I definitely gravitate more towards environments in my work than I do with characters, and I think this is something, however, that I will progress more with over time. Like I used to draw a lot of characters when I was a teenager, and I think character design is something that I'm most certainly going to explore. I mean, it's important. I also think it's important when bearing in mind like my own made up environments, because I'm doing this by considering what character would best fit into a scene or a place and location that I would potentially be painting. So my main focus this year is to potentially grow my own style through that sort of repetitive workflow. So this is something that can't just be figured out for me in one day or overnight. I'm pretty particular when it comes to the places that are just like sat in my noggin and need progressively to be expressed freely onto the canvas, digitally or traditionally outward, for finalized rendered pieces, if that makes sense. So my artwork digitally is very different from my traditional works of art. So for example, the body of work that I've done of painting my home city, my hometown, Manchester, is very old school and traditional, whereas my digital pieces are much more modern and are gravitated towards like other external realities. I struggle to combine the two, whether or not I will lean on the idea of keeping both completely separate with different superior styles. I think that is something that I'll just either have to work on or just allow myself to keep on unfolding without overthinking about it. I don't know, we'll see. Both my styles, traditionally and digitally, are like completely opposing one another right now. So I know when I'm considering working on concepts, designs, and environments, I have to also consider what type of character would live there or be a part of that scene or be a part of that environment. This paint is kind of pasty if you don't use enough water, but I did notice that with a decent consistency of water that the paint becomes more like fluid and creamier, making for better coverage. So I recommend using thin layers then building up the body of paint. I much prefer using this paint like I would my Winsor & Newton watercolours. Quite a bit of water at first and then slowly transition into less water and more paint to make more opaque, richer results. And this is something that certainly cannot be rushed. Each painting in this episode of the Sketch Files today took me around about 2 to 3 hours to paint. So for all this is sped up, you're literally looking at hours of work. So out of the 3 paintings that I painted, I was least satisfied with this one. So the second painting I did of the train tracks in the water, because I was still trying to understand the medium and I ended up like overworking the paint. So yeah, my bad on my part. I should have been a tad more patient when waiting for each individual layer of the paint to dry. The second painting turned out a little patchy, which is not the result that I wanted. Having worked professionally with acrylic paint now for just over 5 years, I gravitated towards using these paints like I would acrylic. However, it became very apparent to me very quickly that I needed to work with much more thinner layers, which is what I wouldn't do with the acrylic, and then in turn build up the paint layers. I did it sort of the right way with the first scene, but experimented with the paints more on the second scene. By the time I had got around to painting the last scene, I was aware of how to utilise these paints to my best advantage. So when I speak of using water with the paint, there's a very fine line. So if you use way too much water, you'll reduce too much of the colour's saturation. However, if you use just the right amount, you will eventually be able to move the paint around on your chosen surface to like have overall flow and vibrancy. Now it is a catch-22 and definitely something I recommend that you try out for yourselves, guys. I did notice a slight shift in colour value as well. So when some of the paints I was using went down, they appeared to be much more darker, like when they were wet. But then when the paints dried out, they went a lot more lighter. Gouache only mimics the overall look of acrylic and oil. However, I did notice that the paint dried to an almost chalky finish, and I do believe once dry, it would be at a slight risk of cracking. Like if it was dried for a long period of time, like it would crack. So towards the end of the video, you'll see that on the second scene that I painted, I'm actually dusting off some of the paint, and you can see where it appears to be very, very chalky, and I just like lightly feathered that off with my brush, which was like excess like paint that had cracked off from where I removed my tape at the end, like when I do all my tape peeling. So I had to try and find like that sweet spot when working with just the right amount of water. So not too much, not too little of water. However, the paint is versatile, so that is one thing that I really do like about it. Like, it's not oil, it's not acrylic, and it certainly isn't watercolour. At this point, I have slight mixed feelings about this peculiar paint. At any means, I will still continue to conduct my experimentations with this paint set in my sketchbook over, I don't know, maybe quite a long period of time, guys. So once the paint is dried, you can go back and rework areas, like you can soften edges, you can lift the paint from the surface, you can go back and blend a little bit as well, because of course you can reactivate the paint. I personally still find watercolours sort of more effortless than I do with this gouache, but this is just my personal belief. I had to really work the paint, whereas watercolour and acrylic, I can work with my intuition and just go with the flow. I don't run into any like designated pickles. So the paint didn't flow completely naturally when I was working with it. Now perhaps this will change over me being more consistent with this medium over a long period of time. I really do not know. But to this day, it still stands that I love acrylics, and I always will. But gouache, yeah, wow. I don't know, I just need to experiment more. So when I say about the third painting, I was able to utilise the paints to my best advantage. Yeah, to the best of what I was capable of thinking that I was capable of at the time. I obviously know there is so many areas that I need to work on with this paint, like becoming obviously more familiar with it. These were the very first paintings that I ever did with this paint, bearing that in mind. So yeah, I think over the next couple of months, I will continue to work with this paint and continue to try to figure out how this paint is going to work to my best advantage. I was flowing a lot more by the third painting. That does not mean to say that I mastered this medium, because yeah, we're far off that one. But yeah, I hope that this has all made a ton of sense, guys. I do recommend that if you haven't tried gouache, try it out for yourselves. Do share your thoughts and opinions, because this one kind of baffled me, because it is pasty and it's got like a little bit of a tack to it, and this is something that you'll have to feel for yourselves. I know there's a lot more areas and room for improvement when I'm working with this gouache. I just haven't quite figured out what those areas and room for improvement are at the moment. I particularly think it just boils down to the consistency with water, not using too much as I mentioned and not using too less. Now for all they dry lighter, they still hold their luminosity, their brightness, and they're very vivid and vibrant, so I love that. as I'm tape peeling this second scene, you can clearly see that the paint is just flaking away. It's flaking off, and that's where I use my brush just to go over and just dust it all away. That was just completely unavoidable. Anyway, folks, like I mentioned, it's peculiar and I'm still in like a catch-22 mindset with it, but I'm still going to be experimenting with it. So that is all for today's video. Thank you for watching yet another sketch file, and be sure to check out all of my socials, so Facebook, TikTok and Instagram, and I'll be sure to catch you all in the next video. Bye for now.